Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone who's going to be listening. This is Medina Tanor Whiteman, co-founder of the Muslim Writers Salon. And I am delighted to have with me today Sunnah Khan, a multidisciplinary artist. And I'm going to read a little bit of her bio for you. She's a Scottish Pakistani poet, creative facilitator, and I believe a theatre maker. There's no end to your talents, it seems. Her debut pamphlet, I Don't Know How to Forgive You When You Make No Apology for This Haunting, amazing title, was published by Rough Trade Books in 2020, alongside the collective offering from Four Brown Girls Who Write. Her poems have been published in Poetry London, the Rialto and Morocco. In 2024, she was shortlisted for the Aesthetica Poetry Prize, and she is currently working on her debut poetry collection and a whole lot of other things, which we're going to be hearing about today. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Sunnah.
So much. Thanks.
It's so great to have you here with us. So first of all, I want to dig in with all the things that we love to hear about from just writers, but in general, but particularly Muslim writers. How is it that you got into the creative arts? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, my journey was quite a unique one, to be honest. Alhamdulillah. I don't think it was beyond what I could have dreamt. I've always written. I've written since I was a child. Started writing when I was 8 as a way just to, that child who kind of talks to birds and is kind of, in its own little world. But I've been writing since I was a child. And then but never really sharing anything. And I had moved on to London in my late 20s, and I met it was a very strange story. Basically, I was working in documentary film. I was still writing quietly. And my flatmate said to me, "Oh, I have a friend who's gathering some people together on a boat in Bermondsey, and they're all going to share things that they do in secret, but they don't say out loud." So it was a real kind of exercise in vulnerability. And I said, "Wow, that sounds amazing. Can I come?" And he said, "Yeah, of course, come along, come." So I went to this boat in Bermondsey, and that's where I met what then became Four Brown Girls Who Write. So we were all sharing little things that we wrote in secret, from plays to poems to stories, and the four of us just really resonated with each other's voices. And we set up a WhatsApp group, and then we started sharing with each other. And we realized all of us had the same imposter syndrome, which was we didn't really believe in our own voices. But because we'd grown up not seeing our voices as South Asian women at that point, what bound us was our South Asianness, being reflected in the kind of, the kind of literature of British literature or American literature at that time.
Yeah, amazing. That sounds like the most fun, probably a bit scary as well to enter in that kind of space. But it makes me really think about how important it is to have spaces created for people to share their creative stuff, because you'd think that creative people would just sort of spontaneously just like get it out there, but it doesn't really work like that. I mean, quite often, famously, Emily Dickinson and people like that, if they didn't have a space sort of in some way accessible, then and as you say, if your voice is not represented, people like you're not represented, it's just like a kind of subconscious thing that you're told, no, this realm is not for your voice. It's not it doesn't really belong here. But then where does it belong? It has to belong somewhere, doesn't it? So I'm really impressed by your bravery to jump into a project like that, and of course you're going to make some amazing connections. So tell us a bit about the Four Brown Girls Who Write.
I mean, that was, the bravery of that wasn't, I think it was all from Allah. It felt very divinely written. Like we all just resonated with each other. What we did together was initially set up a WhatsApp group where we would sort of share just little scraps of words and poems as they'd come to us, or share ideas and thoughts. And I guess through the act of sharing with each other, each of us strengthened our confidence, because we're always our own worst critic. We always think, I don't know, this is rubbish. And actually, I've found through time, the pieces that I think are the worst or I dismiss are usually some of my best writing. So I was like, oh God, I really can't trust myself. But yeah, through the four of us kind of just encouraged each other. And then one of the girls in the group had, she was doing a kind of arts open studios, and she said, why don't we perform? Why don't we read our work out loud? And the three of us were like, absolutely not. We're never going to out loud. This is never going to happen. So we all kind of tentatively stood together on this little space in this beautiful garden in South London, and we kind of held each other. And then one of us would step forward, and then I guess what kind of organically happened in that moment was, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I love you. I believe in your work. Just speak to us. And the necessity to have people around you who believe in you and can hold you like that in a structure, in a society designed to make you feel perpetually insecure and fearful and not good enough. And I think what we did without even realizing, it really did feel like it was from Allah. It was just this gift of bypassing all of this. I don't know, you have to have a certain level of privilege to become a writer. You have to have a certain, power. How are you going to open the doors? We kind of set an intention. We're like, we're not going to beg. It will come to us. We're just going to create. And actually 4 people coming together with such unique skill sets, like an artist, a filmmaker, Rosh was like running her own business, the teacher, like we had such different skills together. We became so much more than we were without each other. And that space was so critical in developing us as writers, because we had the space to get it wrong, and we had the space to be held in love in that. And then I think, so then we started performing from there. People just started asking us to do things. And then we were approached by a very small press called Fem Press, who said, have you ever thought of publishing? And we're like, we're not ready. Like, let's just do it. You'll never be ready. So we put together this beautiful collection, very much a kind of collective effort, which actually did really well. It was kind of this kind of DIY underground scene initially, but actually was then being sold in the Tate. It picked up. Things started happening. We started using social media to sort of, start using platforms, but a lot of it just started taking on its own momentum, because I think we were just open to it. And then Rough Trade came along and then kind of, offered to publish us. And I think at that point, what was really interesting in our trajectory was we had sort of formed a sense of collectivity, and our identity was becoming collective. And for me personally, I was very conscious of the fact that the collective has to serve a purpose. It has to serve a purpose in amplifying and uplifting all of us. But equally, I don't wish us to be, we shouldn't be reduced to just being a collective. In the most cheek way, 4 brown girls, right, we all have very distinct identities as South Asian artists, but and backgrounds, but that felt really important. So when it came to figuring out what it would be with Rough Trade, I really felt adamant that we had to have our work stand alone somehow, but still stand together. And that was terrifying for us as a collective. We were like, but what if we're not good enough on our own? And then I was like, well, that's exactly why we have to do this now, because if we don't do this now, we will just become reduced to only moving as this. And I think a collective has to be something that opens and grows and closes and stretches as and when it's needed. And I'm actually not part of the collective at this point at juncture and time. But I'm okay with that as well. I feel like it's, again, I think if we reduce the idea of who we are to some static notion, it loses the essence of what it is to be a human being and having a soul's experience and journey. And these things come, they open, they close, we come together, we come apart. And that's the beauty of it.
Amazing. Wow. I'm just taking notes here because I just love hearing you talking about this. It feels like one of our meetings about when we were first developing the Muslim Writers Salon. Like, what is it that people need? What is it that people are lacking? As creative people, I wrote about how, we need this feedback and this mirroring and this encouragement, because I also found the same thing with, even though I was writing ever since a child, I was not really encouraged to put the stuff out there. And anytime I did, I would get rejections. And so you just think, well, what's the point? Because I'm just going to get rejection anyway, and nobody's telling me why. So that was kind of frustrating and limiting. But it was through a writing group that I was able to get past kind of put my ego into a box a little bit. Like, I think when you sit down and you just create and you're not thinking about how does this represent me, and what are people going to think about me, and you take that element of other people's validation of you out of the picture altogether, even if it's just for a short while. It's so liberating. And it made me just feel like when you're describing that thing of, you holding each other, it gives me goosebumps really, to like, that thing of holding each other, and I believe in you, I love you, I encourage you. And then that gives you the strength to step out and do your thing, not for anybody else, not for an adoring public, or like even an expectation of that, but just for that pure joy and that love. It does feel divine in that sense of it. It raises the question for me, like, what is it actually revolutionary to tap into your divinely sourced creativity and step away from the need for people's validation? Like, is that not just the most revolutionary thing that you can do? That's kind of what it makes me think.
Isn't that what we're all being asked to do? Isn't that the bigger project? Like, if we're needing the validation of people, we've made them gods, essentially, haven't we? It's
Wow.
like so susceptible to that. We're all, because we're sitting in cultures entrenched in spaces that are telling you that's your only way of finding worth. So yeah, to center that is the most radical revolutionary act, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a rejection of a sort of pharaonic self-presentation of an industry or an establishment as being the kind of the arbiters of your worth. And that's, I think, what is so challenging as a writer, as a creative, not just as a Muslim, but also as a Muslim, because we do have this narrative of rejecting false gods and rejecting, the need for pleasing people and worrying about what they think. Well, that often is sidelined as well, isn't it? As a Muslim, that's not necessarily foregrounded in your education at all. It can be quite the contrary, it can be quite conformist. But yeah, and I love how you talked about having the space to get it wrong, and how you'll never be ready, just like get it out there and do it scared kind of thing. And this DIY underground scene, I mean, how beautiful that you created something very organic, very grassroots, very spontaneous, and just in, the having that mutual solidarity and that mutual support. And then it gets picked up. I mean, isn't that just what always happens? Like, I used to live in East London. Chelsea used to be the artist district. It's where all the artists were like living in squats and like little bed sits and stuff. And then ends up becoming like one of the most wealthy gentrified parts of London. Same things happened in Whitechapel, same things happened in, Shoreditch, that whole area. Yeah, there's so much that we could talk about there. The collective being about serving the purpose to amplify, but not being reduced to a collective either. And it made me think of the Khalil Gibran quote about love. And this is more about like romantic love or marriage, but like having space in your togetherness, and that space allowing you to, excuse me, have freedom to breathe as well within that. And then you can kind of come back into a group with something fresh and individual and unique. But it is this dance, isn't it? It's a kind of in Spanish, there's a lovely word, va y ven. It's like a go and come, like a coming and going, a seesawing, or a swing, an oscillation between the group and the individual. We've gotten very deep already, and it's only 20 past.
That I love space, yeah, the space to be within the togetherness. And I think that's very tricky territory to navigate as creatives, because you do need a lot of hand holding sometimes, and other times you don't. And like, we're all in different, points in our journey. So to even just, it is, you're right, it's a dance. It's how do you find that synchronicity amongst it all? It's feel challenge of the challenge.
The unity in the plurality, or the plurality in the unity.
But I really wanted to say, if I had any advice on being in a collective, or if you wanted to start your own collectives, whoever it is that's listening, I would say it's not just about finding a group of people. I mean, it can be, of course it can be, but if I had advice, I'd say find the best people. Find the people who are so much better than you at everything, if you can, and be around them. Like, find those people so that you can push. And maybe that's not the right way to put it, but find people who have different strengths from you, like that compliment, because I know like one of us in the collective was so confident and so able to be on stage that it pulled that part of us out. And then someone else like Sharon in the collective she was just so precise with her language. She had such a finesse for the details of language. And there's so much that we were learning through these from each other's skills and strengths that we couldn't necessarily see in each other ourselves, but we could see it in each other. I'd say find those people, be around those people who you can learn from, grow with, push yourself. Yeah.
That's really beautiful advice. I feel like also this is why we want to do this. We've been doing this series over the last couple of years of interviews with authors, because it is so important to see what worked for people, get that encouragement, and be around people who are really dedicated to that art and that craft. Because it rubs off on you. It's like reading really good writing. It rubs off and you get inspired and you go, oh, I like what they did. How did they do that? I'm going to try and figure that out. And it just keeps pushing you a little bit more each time. There's a lot to say about privilege and voice, but I want to come back to that later because I want to talk about your work with Palestinian writers. Learning in community also totally our jam. Like there's something completely transformative and different when you move away from a top-down kind of pyramidal. Again, we're back to Pharaoh, the pyramidal system of like the ones at the top trickling it all down to all of you peasants down below. If instead you are learning from each other, it's a whole different ball game. It's a phenomenal, it's actually very transformational. It feels like something is happening on a cellular level when you go into that kind of creative space, doesn't it? When you're around artists. So talking of art, okay, so would love to know if or how your Islam influences your art.
I think in those earlier years, so I kind of formed or was part of the collective and from about 2017. And I think in those early years, it was just, I think I was still growing and trying to understand myself. I was brought up in a Muslim household. I've had parents who were very generous in ways that they kind of opened me to Sufism, they opened me to different ways of thinking, but there was also that kind of, as you said, like, you know, the compliance of just, this is what you do and get on. And I think there was, my faith was always in the undercurrents of my work because it would come out, but it wasn't a conscious thing that I centered. I think after I was published with Rough Trade, I started really thinking more deeply about, because there's a point at which you just want to grow, right? You're just like, what is this? I want to try this. Oh my goodness, somebody wants to hear me. Wow, what can this do? And you're learning all these new tools and you're kind of expanding. And I think especially if you've not used your voice much, for me, I look back at some of my work and I can see the evolution of like, that's that child voice. Okay, this is the teenage voice. This voice needs to come out. And I think it's still evolving, but I think post that work, grappling with quite difficult themes within that work around silence, but personal silences and public silences. I then kind of started asking myself questions of like, what do I want my work to do? As opposed to, can I make work? Can I do this? It kind of shifted to, what is the value of this? And one of the poets I really love is Mary Oliver. I've always loved her. And there's a podcast episode that she did for On Being quite near the end of her life. And she talked about what she asks of her work. She asks her work, she sort of sets, forgive me for getting this wrong, but she asks 3 questions of her work. Like, does it have a genuine body, an authentic heart, and something, there was, it'll come back to me, but there's 3 points, and it was like, and does it have a spiritual purpose? And she's like, these are the guidelines by which I decide. Please, if I've got it wrong, look it up, but it's roughly those ideas. But the spiritual purpose, when I heard that, it resonated so deeply with me of, what do I want my work to do? And I think that's the point where I also started, I guess, coming more into actively choosing my faith, not just taking it as a passive inheritance. And I think the last 2 years now, as we've witnessed this genocide and living through genocidal times and witnessing the faith of Palestinians and the truth of that faith in the face of what they're facing has just, it's really made me feel that my work now has to center that faith in a way that it has to have a spiritual purpose. It has to be more, yeah, there's something deeper moving now, I guess. I'm very much still on that journey, but that's, I think, all I could say on it.
Amazing. It's so inspiring to hear you talk about writing. I mean, like, apart from your writing itself, which is brilliant, but just hearing the way that you, yeah, it's incredible. It makes me think of a conversation we had with Munira Pilgrim, who's a fantastic, you may know her, Bristol-based, a Bristolian poet, and she talks about poetry as a technology. And that's what it made me think of when you said, you know, what is it that I want my work to do, my art to do, not for it to just exist for art's sake, which is not necessarily the worst reason to do art. I mean, of course, you can do art just because you need to express something, you want to put more beauty into the world. That is already a spiritual purpose, isn't it? Because Allahu Jamal wa huwa yuhibbul Jamil. So like God is beautiful and he loves beauty. So already that is a spiritual purpose, but like what impact you want to have on people? This is a really important question. And when we do our book coaching, we often ask our writers, you know, what is the impact you want to have on your reader? Like what kind of reader do you want? For example, what kind of relationship do you want to build with them? How do you want them to feel about your work? Is this going to be like one of these paperbacks that's like really like soft and dogged because they've come back to it 100 times? Is it something they go to when they're in like their darkest moments? Is it something that they give to their friends on their birthday? You know, like what is the relationship you have with writers? Like that already is huge. Like your relationship to Mary Oliver, I guess you can call it a parasocial relationship, I guess. But, you know, already that writer has influenced you in your writing purpose in such a profound way. And it also what you said of her questions that she asks of her work, it makes me think of this old Arab proverb. When words are about to pass through the gates of the mouth, ask them 3 questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Beautiful.
It mirrors it so nicely. It's like, what is going to happen when these words come out my mouth? Like, what impact are they going to have on others? And the care involved and the consideration that you have to have for your actions in the world. It's like this is deeply Islamic, actually. This is very much an Islamic ethic. So it's so fascinating to hear how, you know, this is a very broad question. How does your faith impact your art? It can impact it in such subtle ways without you even, it doesn't have to show up as writing a poem about prayer.
No, yeah, I agree with you. It's reverence, it's beauty, it's the subtlety of it for sure. And it's really fascinating. I really didn't know. I mean, I've always kind of communed with Mary Oliver in some way. I've always felt that she was there somewhere. But I only recently discovered that one of her main influences is Rumi, that she would read Rumi every single day.
Serious. I didn't know that either.
I love that she was communing with Rumi, and then do you know, you're picking up the same resonance, you're picking up the truth somewhere, hearing it across all of these time, yeah, planes of time.
Allah, subhanallah. It's so interesting also to hear, for example, book recommendations. I love getting book recommendations from people I like, right? And people whose ideas I like, because I know that those books are going to nourish me. Because if they're nourishing them, then they're going to nourish me as well. It's like, okay, you like Chinese food, I like Chinese food. Let's go out for a Chinese meal together, you know? um, okay, so I want to ask now about the relationships between all the different strands of work that you do, because you make films, you do documentaries, you mentioned that, you do poetry. Like it's extraordinary how expansive your creative output is. So tell us a little bit about how you got into doing all these different things and how they interrelate.
Stories far too long with you. We'll be here for
Summarized version.
I guess at the heart of it, I think it was always about storytelling. I think because I do think, am I just all over the place? Do I go in a million directions? But ultimately, I think, yeah, I think for me it was always, I remember reading a book as a kid. I remember the smell of the pages of this book because it smelled like baking, like cakes baking. And I remember smelling this book, and I don't even remember what I was reading. I know where I was. I was in my grandmother's house, in the bed, in the room next to hers. And I finished this book, and I remember having this deep thought, and I couldn't have been, I was less than 10. And I remember thinking, imagine what it would be to make people feel like this. I read this and this made me feel something so deeply. And I just always wondered what would that be. So I think there was something under that was always then fueling what happened next. And I went on to study anthropology and philosophy, but I was very anthropology. Just I loved it. I thought this is what education should be. It should open you up to seeing the world in new ways. And then went on to do my master's in journalism. And I had this, I feel like we all have this, but I have these very specific photographic memories of moments that then shift the course of everything that comes next. But when I was doing my master's in journalism, there was an event where they had brought journalists in and they brought documentary filmmakers in, and we were as students allowed to go and speak to them all. And the journalist just kept bringing everything back to the fact. This is the fact. Here's the fact. And the documentary, for the filmmakers, were much more interested in the context and the color and how things feel. And I was like, I think I want to go this way. So it was just one step goes this way, just listening deeply to what is being asked of now and what happens next. I think I've always lived like that, alhamdulillah. And yeah, so the journalism then led me into, I got a traineeship with Channel 4 and worked as a assistant producer, and then worked for 10 years, have still been working as a freelancer, as a producer and director for Channel 4, BBC, developed things for Netflix, and yeah, alhamdulillah.
Amazing. We'd love to have at some point, maybe not now, but I'd love to see like a list of your credits, because I'd love to watch your documentaries, because I love documentaries as well. I have, when you said that about, what would it be like to make people feel, not just to feel in one particular way, but just to feel, full stop. Because I think especially, I mean, I don't know if you're coming from a Scottish context, it's probably quite different, but I grew up in the east of England, and I just felt that, culturally there was a kind of almost a stigma against feeling, like if you felt things, there was a bit of a risk involved in that, you don't want people to know that you're having any feelings. It's a bit dangerous. You're vulnerable. People might see you cry or be exorbitantly happy or something, and as if there's something wrong with that. Yeah, and I think there's a lot we could say about capitalism kind of taking our ability to feel away and replacing it with the need to just chop. I mean, that is a whole other thing as well. But
This is part of the revolution, though, isn't it? It's like to embrace that vulnerability, to publicly feel, to stand together in grief. If we had more space within our everyday lives to allow for the nuance of what it is to be human, I think we would have so much of the harm that we're perpetuating would not exist, because it would be ingrained in the ways that we've been educated and brought up to be in this world.
yeah,
I mean, you're right. This could be
there's a whole podcast in itself. But I think it is ultimately like art does have something to do with empathy. Like whichever version of art you're choosing, there's some element of, if I can do something like music, for example, singing, sounds have this incredibly like visceral and immediate impact on people's feelings. You can play upbeat music to dogs and they'll start smiling. You can play classical music to plants and they start growing better. It's just like there's something very kind of direct and not even logical about it. You don't have to even have words involved. You can impact how people feel. When people sing in a choir, their heartbeats synchronize. SubhanAllah. It's just so extraordinary what we were able to do with art. And then you sort of think about, okay, well, if an artist is able to make me feel, and me doing art, I'm able to make somebody else feel, well, there's a bit of a responsibility there too. I have to think about, like, how do I want to make them feel? Am I just going to gratuitously present something really grotesque and horrific to them without any other kind of purpose there? Which I think sadly is often missing in the arts, like especially movies and things like that. There's a lot of kind of shock value in just sex and violence because it's quick and easy.
I really loved, and it's been a real privilege to work in particularly observational documentaries, which is kind of what I was doing, kind of difficult access, sensitive access. it was such an honor to be immersed in other people's worlds and to kind of have to take care of their stories. But it was also incredibly problematic to work within structures that I inherently find have such deep capitalist values. So it's
Ooh,
all, I'm not going to pretend that those things are, you know, we're living within these dichotomies and contradictions of how we move. But what I wanted to say was the other work that I feel I'm really grateful to have expanded into through the poetry, I guess, because poetry was sort of happening in tandem. This was like my bread and butter documentary film. I need to live, and then the poetry was just sort of happening. But then I sort of expanded out into creative facilitation because I felt like I do, and I think I believe that it's like, and I ask Allah that Allah, whatever good you give me, let me make more good for others with it. And I think
I
that
mean,
to open up every person to poetry, I really believe in that. When we talk about feeling, we're so conditioned out of feeling. I love running workshops where somebody's like, I am so scared and I don't do this and I only use my rational mind. I just love that so much because I really hold to this. I really hold to, like, we were born to wonder. Like, we were born into this world. We were not we didn't rationalize our ways into this world. We were born into this world to wonder. We learned the names of things through wonder. We learned to touch and feel and to bring people back to that primordial sense, or to open them up to that. Is alhamdulillah one of the most beautiful things I get to do. Yeah.
love that line so much. Oh my gosh, that's going to be the clip that we share on IG. We were born into this world to wonder. Oh, wow. 100%, 1000%. And the one thing I would add to that is just, well, it's the same as what you're saying, but like once you are able to tap into feeling and recognizing that your actions cause feelings in other people, that is empathy, isn't it? It's like automatically you're going to start understanding, oh, other people have feelings, you know?
Touching your own inner depth. If you're numb to your own depths, it's quite, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's also, I think, about writing as a practice and writing as a. We were going to record a podcast later today. We might still manage, I don't know, but about writing as a practice because it is about that, isn't it? It's about kind of opening that trap door and going, what have I got in here? This is a nice little smorgasbord of the weird and the wonderful, and you're gonna have to like work your way through the crap, the difficult stuff, the painful stuff, the things that make you freeze. I mean, people respond in very different ways to their pain, but I think one of the ways that often we are conditioned, and maybe this is a very British thing, I don't know, but it is very common to freeze in the face of those difficult feelings. Okay, well, which leads us quite neatly to your work with Palestinian poets. And one thing I noticed on your Instagram, and you can tell me about this more because I'm not sure if I'm getting all the details right, but I believe last year you were offered a membership of the Royal Society of Arts or something like this, and you actually turned it down because of their lack of statement about Gaza or their complicity even. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I basically at that exact moment, was it last year or the year before? But anyway, the date at which kind of around a month or two around which I was offered that or invited or put forward. And at first, obviously I was so honored. I was like, that's a beautiful thing to be honored with and given open doors with. But at that exact same time, I think about a month later, obviously the genocide was still ongoing at that point. The RSA had hosted an event in their building with an Israeli ambassador. Please don't quote me if I've got the details of this wrong, but it was definitely somebody from Israel that was standing for not for Palestinian rights. And they then sort of abdicated all responsibility from it happening and were like, look, we don't, we didn't really know. And also we're taking a neutral stance on this. And, so I was just like, man, I feel like we're in a new time. I feel like we're in a time now where we have seen the dark consequence of neutrality, and for art spaces to say we don't have an opinion either way is just, I just don't fundamentally believe. I fundamentally believe if that is what art spaces are doing, then there's no hope left outside in society, because if art spaces can't speak for the truth, if art spaces can't take a side and have an opinion, then they're also just the slaves of capitalism. They're all speaking, we're all drumming the same drum, and then being grateful for an opportunity. And I felt like if I felt it was important to stand against that, to say, what is the power that we're giving to these accolades? Like, what does it mean for me to accept this and say, oh wow, that would take me somewhere, but at what cost, at what expect, like these subtle insidious ways that we're just, we're so immersed in it. I don't want to sound like I'm being self-righteous. I just feel that we're all so subtly being asked to comply constantly. So it felt important just to say, I reject that power. And actually, I think as an artist, one of the more interesting things I'm exploring with my faith is like Islam is a practice, art is a practice, right? It's like, I'm thinking about like, how do I practice my faith as an art practice, as well as, I'm curious about that. I was in Venice last year at the Biennale, and I asked my friend, I sort of just started praying regularly, or trying to at that time. And I asked my friend, will you stand next to me? I really want to pray in this space. I just wanted to see what would happen. And I put my head on the ground of this gallery. And on the walls of the gallery, there's just all these paintings and sculptures and all this, the things you're meant to revere. And it was just such an interesting experience of what I felt in my body of, someone's going to tell me to stop this, and what am I doing this in this space, but also putting my head on the ground and just being reminded, like, this is not your God. These are not your gods. We are constantly subtly being told, this is God. Look up, look at this. Look, this is the institution. Put your head on the ground. Remember who your God is. And for me, it was just such a interesting practice to push myself into that. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. I can totally picture that. I can absolutely picture like the new pantheon of, the Roman deities or whatever. They're just like the Scorseses and I don't know, like these people you're meant to look up to and kind of venerate. And I think there's a fine line for us as artists between having respect for and, honoring the work of and celebrating and all that kind of stuff. And actually kind of like recognizing that there's something bigger than that person as well, and that they're getting their genius from somewhere. Genius, the word genius comes from the same root as jinn. Like it's literally like spirit, and yet somehow there's this kind of glass ceiling there where it's just assumed, oh, it comes spontaneously from that person. SubhanAllah. I feel like we know lots of people in common, but I'll leave that for later. I know a lady who won at a prize at Venice Biennale. I think it was last year as well. Anyway, I love what you're saying about this. Is all very much, it resonates very much for me, and I feel like this that leads us into the situation with Gaza and Gazan poets and Palestinian poets, because you mentioned earlier about how some voices have privilege. And this is something I think about a lot as a white woman, as a Muslim, as somebody who is very vocal. I am, I'm all about voice. Like I'm literally all about voice, whether it's writing or speaking or singing or, poetry. I have this kind of almost compulsion to be honest. And it's sort of, it pains me. It really actually feels like almost like a physical suffocation if I can't speak. And yet I kind of look back on my life in the past, and I certainly didn't always have that feeling of liberty to speak. Maybe that's a young person thing as well, because you have this imposter syndrome as a young person. I haven't studied enough yet. I don't know my way around this conversation yet. I don't have all the resources and I don't have all the references. And I also studied anthropology, and it is nice to be able to like quote somebody like, oh, Fanon says this, or I don't know, W. Du Bois says this. Great, all wonderful, but it's all just about kind of enabling you like little bit by little bit to embrace your voice. And I really feel like the voice is a somatic phenomenon. It's something that happens in your whole body. And like by enabling yourself to speak when you have been silenced or whatever, for whatever reason, but for being a woman, being a minority, because of racism, because of homophobia or whatever, you have been marginalized, or because of class. I mean, like class is such a huge category there. Because your accent isn't right, whatever. to be able to reclaim that and use your voice. It can make you physically shake. It can, you know, you notice how people kind of like, I notice there's some things that happen in your, might happen in your throat, in your shoulders, in your knees might start wobbling, because there's something so powerful about actually speaking your truth. And when you haven't been able to do it, it feels like a shock to the system, right? So to be able to acknowledge that there is this incredible silencing that is going on from a level of legacy media, broadsheets, the BBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, all of these like establishment, again, it's the establishment, it's that kind of those portals, gatekeeping whose voices are allowed and whose voices are, you know, verboten, like, no, we're just going to gag you because your voices are not really necessary. So I want to get into like how you got involved with helping or working with Palestinian writers and poets. I mean, obviously this is something that has been very pertinent in the last, couple of years. But yeah, walk us through that.
I mean, I think initially I was being asked to kind of read work as normal events, poetry events. And I was like, in this time it feels wrong. It just, in my own body, it felt wrong. It was like my poems felt redundant. The words felt redundant in relation to, I guess we're living within these huge contradictions of what we're living through and what we're witnessing. And it felt that actually if I was to take up that kind of space, then I would also have to amplify a voice that has no, who cannot stand here today, who cannot speak right now. Then my privilege, and I hold also privilege, even from my positionality, my privilege is I will have to use that privilege to raise that voice. That started feeling really important. And I guess also as a kind of antithesis to this real feeling of we're all watching and what can we do? Do you know, like we're all, and I really fundamentally feel like, of course, the nervous system at this point is like when you're bombarded with this level of what we're witnessing, it's very easy to go into freeze. Do you know, you're like, but also the only way out of that is to move and to do something. And each of us has a capacity to do something. And even if it is not, I really believe it. I think, yes, maybe we cannot save Palestine, but Palestine is saving us. I think on a deeper level, the emperor has no clothes now. We can see everything as it is, truly. And I think each of us has the capacity within us to do something, whether that is just in our community, with the care that we show around us, to say, no, the antithesis to this violence is more care. Let's keep adding more care. And I guess, yeah, and then I kind of came across, there was somebody on Instagram that was sharing, I saw a post by a woman called Alia who had shared this Palestinian water project, or she was talking about this water project, and this was kind of just before winter was coming last year. And this woman from Gaza, her name is Haya Muhammad, she's 22 years old. She had shared this water project. She'd been displaced from Khan Yunis. She was now in El Mawasi, and the water that they were using to clean their clothes and wash their dishes, they were also having to drink. There's no sanitary, there was no water. So she was raising money to try and get solar panels to be able to create a well that would provide fresh water before winter set in. And I read some of her words around her love of water in a few of her poems, and I was just so touched with, somebody recently said to me, some of the truest words come straight from the heart to the mouth, and you could feel that in her words. I felt it instantly. And I also just thought, what a beautiful gift to, within, we're all sitting here going, God, this is too much. And actually she's immersed in that space, and yet she is still seeing the capacity to do something good within that space. SubhanAllah, I really was touched by it. And then I guess over time, I just really believed in her words. I felt like her work should exist. I think we all know what is happening to Palestinian voices and voices that are speaking in any way against what is going on right now. And I felt that the necessity of her voice hasn't fully been amplified yet, actually, because what we are seeing is Palestinian voices outside of Gaza they're speaking, but actually she has been documenting through this genocide. She's been writing, she's been sharing. So I felt that what do I have within my capacity is I might have years of experience of editing and writing, but I can offer the support. I can be an ally in helping to support her to shape her words and get them up. And so we have been working together to put a book together of a kind of it's poetics and prayer and a diarized account of the genocide. And I think in a way it serves two purposes. One is that her voice should exist, and that when you hear her work, inshallah, or you see her work, you'll see why. But also I think we're living in a time where so much of what we have witnessed has only been witnessed by the people who chose to see it and the people who chose to look at it, and the archive only exists online. It only exists in this social media space, which we already know is being, people are being shut down, accounts are being closed. And I maybe that part of my brain that thinks about the future and it thinks about legacy, thinks like, where is the archive? What will continue to live as witness? And her work should live as a physical object, should live as a testimony that goes on beyond and does more in the world, inshallah.
Amazing. Oh, I can't wait to see that book. That's going to be extraordinary. I mean, it feels very, very poignant to talk about, the legacy that Gaza is leaving, as if it's already gone. It feels so tragic and so utterly heart-wrenching because it's not gone. But yeah, it is, they're the seeds too, it's like they're incredible gardeners. I find this really fascinating about Gaza. Not only are Palestinians phenomenally educated, they have like a higher level of doctorates per capita than like practically anywhere else in the world. I know Palestinians are like, oh yeah, this guy on my street, he used to just be a fruit seller. He had like 3 doctorates. They just did it because they wanted to keep studying. Incredibly articulate people who've never left Gaza, who speak English perfectly. I think, how do you speak another language that well? And then, one guy I've been doing not a book with, but I've been communicating with in Gaza. I mentioned this to him. I was like, I'm so impressed that you're so eloquent. And he studies dentistry. It's not like he studies literature. He studies dentistry, and it's called Ibrahim Abu Saqir. And he said, well, don't forget that before Israel, the British colonized us. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. But yeah, apart from that, they're incredible gardeners. And it's almost cliche now to talk about their resilience, but it's like, yeah, when you're in that situation where it's unimaginable to us to like needs must, you just actually have to keep making water. And I've seen some of these videos about these water projects, desalination, or desalination with using bicycles and all this kind of incredible stuff, making clean water, filtering it using toilet paper and cotton wool in the corner of a plastic bag. I mean, like things that we just don't have any clue about how much effort is going into just producing one glass of clean water, let alone water to wash your clothes with or your body or anything like that. Mashallah, tabarakallah. I think it's an incredible work that you are doing, and an act of solidarity.
I also just wanted to say that I know that part of the way of working on this, so it is yet to be, maybe I can't say it yet, but some of her work will be published very soon, very, very soon by a London indie poetry press. So that's going to come out very soon, but I can't say anything more just yet.
Okay, well, keep us in the loop because that's going to be amazing, and maybe we can do it or something.
And then we'll do the bigger book. The bigger book will exist. And actually, I guess what I wanted to say is currently a lot of the traditional publishing models are still also embedded in capitalism and Zionism, or we just do why call it what it is. But I also, again, maybe it's because I came into publishing through such a radical, organic way, but I really truly believe that we can disrupt this. I think we can disrupt it in ways that we have so much more power as human beings collectively than we realize. And for this book, for example, if I don't find a private investor to invest in this, because the idea of it is if somebody privately invests, the money that will be made from selling this book will go to Haya and support her to live while she's here, and otherwise it will go on to support other Palestinian voices and amplify them, so it will have a social impact. or we crowdfund it, because I don't believe that we have to sit here and wait for power to give us permission, because they are literally, no, it's not coming tomorrow. It's not coming. So I feel like we need to organize, we need to galvanize and recognize that, that we have. It's making me want to read you a poem, actually, but yeah.
Oh yes, we haven't heard any of your poems yet. Do you want to read us a poem or a couple of poems?
Oh, I feel like this one, I think I'd quite like to read you.
I'd gotten so, carried away in our conversation, I'd completely forgotten that I wanted to hear some of your poems and some of Haya's as well.
Love to do that. I'll begin with a poem called Murmurations. And this was written when we were all protesting, and we hope we're all continuing to protest, but when the word ceasefire felt like it meant something, which now feels like redundant language. When the people shout ceasefire, I imagine you standing in front of a gun, whispering please under your breath. Your mother kissing your eyes closed as the metal hurtles unblinking towards your face. Tomorrow, we promise something else will happen, but it is today again. We move pen, point to paper, pin image to archive, lean into scripture. Our hearts move permanently into our mouths, and somehow the only thing outside that moves with great urgency are the bombs we unwittingly paid for that greet you from across the sea like a cruel joke. Everything is in motion. Even you continue to cease, to cease, to cease. The echo of ceasing is relentless. We watch the fire in its forever now, tapping our fingers urgently against screen as if we might orchestrate a new sound for stop, as if we could collectively break glass to set the right alarm off. Some days, I want to tell you that I'm sure the only way to hold you is in my prayers. I know you would laugh. You would say, look up at the sky. Let the starlings show you how emotion is a movement made of many, that a murmur is more than what is whispered, that when we move together, our breath becomes the wind, disarming grave danger with the sound of our wings. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. And I could just picture it, and I love the comparison there of the murmuration of starlings, which is truly, I think, one of the most spectacular natural phenomena in the world. And then this shout, this collective shout and this collective movement of stop. There's so many lines there. It is today again. I love that usage of language. I mean, how often do we think of today being again? And then the echo of ceasing now and orchestrating a new word for stop. I mean, it's just so lush. What a beautiful poem. And just rising out of sheer grief and frustration. And, collectively we have been gagged. Like this is I think the frustration is that where is democracy if you have this many millions of people in this many countries of the world, this large proportion, large percentage, over 50%, 60, 70% of people wanting this to stop, and nothing changes. It's maddening. And I think that kind of madness in a way is a good kind of madness. There's a sort of holy rage in it that can stimulate, inshallah, it stimulates extraordinary things. And like you say, I don't want to have the vanity to think that each one of us individually is going to make all this stop, because as much as we want that to happen, we know that there's a lot more going on. But the
You're
murmuring being louder. Sorry, what were you saying?
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, but we are being forever changed by this. We're being asked to hold ourselves accountable in new ways. We're being asked to care about each other in new ways. We're being asked to reevaluate whose validation we're asking for and why. You know, I feel like so much is being asked of this moment of us that you're right. Maybe we cannot shift the course of what's happening, and only Allah knows why everything is happening exactly as it is. But the fact that we're being asked to bear witness, we're also being asked that, like, I believe it. I believe prayer is not just us putting our heads on the ground. Prayer is action. Prayer is set the intention and just move, even if it's just with a bit more gentleness to your neighbor. Do something. Just stay human. Please, we have to stay human in the face of this. Haya said to me when they started bombing again, and things are looking bleak right now, you know, she's trying to raise money to have enough money so when the borders open, the hope is that she can get out. But the reality is right now that isn't even an option. You know, aid isn't going in, the borders are closed. We know where things are. But she said, please, please do not give up hope. That's what they want. They want you in despair. And I think, yeah, I think we really need to hold to any small. I feel like I have to do this. It's not an option. It's like, I will drown in this if I don't do something, some, you know, what do I have within my capacity to write words, to amplify a voice? I think we've all got
Yeah.
something that we can do.
And there is a kind of a moral and even religious imperative in that, because in Islam, like, despairing is haram. Like, it's actually forbidden for us to despair. Like, you have to find a way to keep the hope together, even if you don't feel like it's deserving, even if you don't feel like, if you feel like it's too much or it's some kind of privilege to feel hope. It's like, no, you just have to do it one way or another. You have to keep getting up. And what we are having to do on their behalf is so little compared to what they're having to do in a
I'm also
day-to-day.
I'm also conscious of the fact that, I don't know, I feel like we're currently experiencing what is a perpetual war. And I'm just conscious of our psyches and our emotions and our bodies are not used to having to sustain being in war constant. I mean, they are not, but we're also having to think about that. I think we do have to, I'm not saying this in a capitalist self-care way, but I think we really have to be sustained and sustainable in, and I think that is making sure we're loving each other well through this and caring for each other. And that feels really important.
Yeah, that's really the meaning of, like, the genuine meaning of sustainability, because it's been turned into this like greenwashing kind of label that you can slap on any old thing, you know, and it's sustainable because, you know, 3 trees got planted, which might maybe later got neglected. Who knows? I totally agree, and I just saw a book today called 52 Weeks to a Sweeter Life by Farzana Doctor, and which is a guide, like a manual for activists and you know, people who are working in either social activism or social work, healers, therapists, you know, people who are actively engaging with other people's pain an awful lot, to build this resilience and to figure out how to, yeah, I mean, this is what one of the reasons why art is so important, because it is a release, and you sort of think about how the difficulties of people of the past. I often kind of like go back, you know, think about history and how did people just get up in the morning and keep going and keep wanting to live when they had, you know, really bad dentistry and the plague and cholera and, you know, children dying under 2 and, you know, like life expectancies of like in the 40s. Somehow they managed to find ways to make life meaningful in much more difficult situations that we in the, you know, privileged West have to deal with. And so what can we learn from that? Like, and what were they doing? They were getting together and singing. They played instruments. They prayed together. They worked together. They did stuff in the field. They did all their crafts together. I don't want to be too kind of nostalgic about it either, because, you know, I'm not suggesting we go back to that kind of life in all its capacities, but what can we learn from that, and what can we repurpose, and what can we do now? You know, it does feel very revolutionary. We are in a phenomenal moment. You know, we're in a kind of critical moment, aren't we? Like at a crossroads, you know, of how we want the world to be. I'm just going to ask, do you want to read one more poem before I ask what?
I aware of time, but I'm also just, I want to end with a poem by Haya. I can either read you another poem by me and then Haya, or I can just finish with another poem you tell me.
I don't mind going on a little bit longer if you want to read two poems. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, where you source inspiration from, and any advice you have to any other writers, if you have a moment to answer that as well.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a very, like, I think my journey was just listening to my heart. And then I went on the journey of, oh, but formal, smart, award-winning poets write like this. And then I started being like difficult and obtuse and breaking language. And I think it's a journey, and I think you have to follow that. I think more recently, in a time where language is becoming redundant and confused, and we can see the mess of what's complicated. Not that I'm undermining complicated poems, but I feel like I'm requiring simplicity right now. I'm deeply in the need for something that speaks to my heart. So I feel like I'm just trying to do a bit more of listening to my heart and letting things come when they come. Equally, I think you can get inspiration from anything and anywhere at any time. And I love games. I love prompts. I love creating prompts for people to come in. And I think anything, you can get that from anything. You can pull a line and just start free writing into it. You can look at an object and say, imagine if I was that object, what would it feel like to be that object? Just open up the playfulness of and the childlike wonder. I think anything that does that will open up something. And sometimes, and at this time, which is new, it's the burning urge to, I can't take this level of injustice. So I think it comes, sometimes it's just you're overwhelmed with beauty. Other times it's the injustice. I think that might be a nice, unless you want anything more from me, I could do a poem on wonder. And
Oh
then
yeah, that sounds lovely. It just makes me think of the Jamal and the Jalal. Like, that's a great prompt to write from as well. Like, I think we're going to be working together. I get the feeling that there'll be some workshops that come out of this somehow.
This is untitled, but I wrote this because I was also just, in this time, I also need wonder. I also need to remember it. Is there a word for wonder? Does it sound the way you do? All gentle minor keys and feathers fluttering baby fern. Is wonder a doing word or a naming word? I like to think of it as a doing thing, the way the first light creeps in and I rush out the door to feel its first kiss. I like to think what is born outside of us is also within us. I catch a purple wisp still dancing as the pink chases the last of night's shadow away. I walk through the thick marsh with my gaze held away from myself. The soft brush of clouds, indiscernible really, like thin cotton gauze freshly spread. The angels have swept the sky clean. There is so much to rush towards in this life, but wonder seems to be the most urgent. It's echoing relentless, its repetitions resoundingly free. I don't know if I will ever find a way to point precisely to it, but I know when I hear its call, it sounds so very true. It renders me speechless. Thank you.
That just took me away. So beautiful. Oh, and I just feel like that, reminding ourselves of awe and wonder and the sacred, they are so important. They're so necessary when you are dealing with anything, just even visually looking at terror, looking at awful things, just to have that respite and have that breath and reminder that, you are going to keep going. This isn't the end. Subhanallah. Thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. I just want to just say, I feel like it feels so strange that this is the first we've met, because it seems like we've sort of been going on parallel trajectories all this time. And it's just such a privilege to hear from you and have your gems of wisdom for artists on the way. fellow wayfarers. So yeah, if you'd like to read a poem by Haya, that would be amazing.
This is a poem called How Do You Find the Way to My Homeland by Haya Muhammad. I carry a backpack through life, moving from place to escape, yet somehow I remain attached to my land. When I return to the tent at night, I pass by a lady cooking on a clay oven. The irresistible smell of food fills the air, and I say to her, "What a wonderful smell." She replies, "Please come, my daughter." She doesn't know me, and I don't know her. I know that this food isn't even enough for her family. This is inevitable in war, yet she invites me and calls me her daughter. Then I realize this is the true path to my homeland. When there's only one loaf of bread left, for 2 days no one touches it despite everyone starving, until my mother divides it amongst us. Then I know I am on the right path to my homeland. Whatever dish my mother prepares, she sends to our neighbours, and they do the same, so no one sleeps hungry. When you go to offer condolences to relatives for their martyred children, you find yourself being comforted instead by their immense patience, faith, and strength. Walking through streets, you see people sweeping and organising remnants of their homes, others living in the remaining room of their destroyed house, a man sitting on his balcony in a chair from his collapsing house having breakfast. When you go to buy something and the seller tells you, pay what you can, and if you can't pay, don't. Then you realize who the true owners of this land are.
It's just so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it just strikes me how the raw truth of her lived experience is so much more powerful than all the clever metaphors and all the clever, formal inventiveness of someone who's gone through the establishment process of becoming a poet.
What is poetry? That's a whole other session.
Well, I think we'll have to have a part 2. Anyway, I'll let you get on, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I really look forward to seeing everything that you're doing next. And please do keep us in the loop about Haya Muhammad's book, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Alhamdulillah. It's been beautiful to talk to you.